locked it together into a surface. But if you look at the contours, you can't really lock together because you'll have like closed islands in amongst continuous open curves. There's a lot of like kind of top, like which would cause topological problems if you were thinking about this as a nerve surface. So what we actually have to do is triangulate it through what's called a Delaunay mesh and Grasshopper to produce a triangulated mesh. And we can use a series of other tools to produce a more workable mesh. We'll go over some options for that. Fleet did a very nice job of tracking down a set of contours for pretty much most of upstate New York, it seemed like. I cropped this quickly before today's class, but I'm going to try to reset this as an image plane instead of as this background bitmap so you can move it with your model. Basically, this thing is set into a real-world coordinate system. It's from a USGS map. So I just put a started line number at 0, 0, 0, and you can see it's really far away from where our model is, which is somewhere over here. Right? That's not how we want to be operating. So the first thing I want you guys to do is to save a copy of this file as something else. We'll call it just for location or something. And we're going to relocate this whole thing so that the lower left-hand corner here is at 0, 0, 0. Right, so it was in a world coordinate system. Now it's going to be in what we call like our project coordinate system. And once you have this here, like it doesn't move. All right. For the rest of your project, this is going to be the location of your site and of your actual like design. If you're in mine, you're making copies and stuff, it's fine, you can move them all around, but you always bring it back to this location. You don't want to have like stuff floating around in space all over your files, especially when you start working with other people in a professional environment. The project has a coordinate system and everything stays in that system when you're done working with it. Okay? So everyone should be located here. This, even though I've already cropped this down to, this basically is basically a box which is slightly larger than the entirety of the Storm King site, which you guys will be visiting tomorrow. But for today's exercise, it's even more material than we actually need. So what we're going to do is we're going to crop this even further. Just include the area around the main house, which I just happen to know is this area of the map. But if you go to the top view, in the middle of the thing, it's kind of like dog leg looking feel here. I know that that's kind of the area I want to keep. So I'm going to draw a box just using the rectangle tool. Disable my snaps for a second. Basically cropping it down, the whole file down to that area. I'll put it on the red layer. See it? Okay, so I'm basically cropping the whole thing down to that. It doesn't have to be exactly this for your assignment. Something around that area. Okay? So I've just relocated the whole site, so the lower left-hand corner is at 0, 0, 0. And I've drawn a kind of bounding box in the top view of the area I want to keep. And then I'm just going to go ahead and extrude this up. Into kind of a cutting box. And I'm going to select, okay, a bunch of contours, or all of my contours, and then I'm just going to use split. Select that as my cutting object, and I've got to split 65 curves and 238 pieces in my case. And I can go back to the top view, and using Windows Select, delete all the curves outside the box. Everyone should do that much, for sure. And we'll talk about a couple of things. Sometimes it's beneficial to do some cleanup on your meshes. Weird, like these maps are kind of like digitized versions off of surveys, so like weird artifacts will appear that may cause problems in your mesh. as you start going back and forth with your meshes, you'll be able to kind of understand where those problems are. But for example, like a situation like this, I don't want where like I know that this is kind of an artifact of probably an imprecision in the survey. So I'm just going to use my split tool to clean that up. My snapback on. Delete. Join it back together. If we had a lot of time, I'd go through the whole thing and make sure everything was okay, but just kind of keep in mind that you want nice clean curves with no like weird impossibilities. So everyone needs to get something like this. I'll wait for a second. You guys get this part. Let me know if you guys are ready. If anyone is not ready. You guys got a clean set of curves? 5 more minutes? 2 more minutes? 1 minute? Okay. Good vocalization. It's the inverse of the Voronoi. If I had internet, I would show you both of those things, but I don't. So you believe me that Brownian triangles are inverses of Voronois, and if you make a Voronoi project, everyone will laugh at you. Okay, so don't do it. That doesn't make sense now, but down the road, some of you might be tempted. No Voronoi project. Okay, so once we have this curve set inside the box, we're going to go ahead and open up Grasshopper. Which is this guy. And Grasshopper is kind of like a visual way of scripting for people that don't know how to script. And actually, some things it does faster, so there's some, even if you do know how to script, there's some benefit to using it. I generally use it for production use mostly because you may have heard me mention it at the review, but I'm pretty strongly disinterested in linearly parametric things. And purely indexical things, which is kind of what Grasshopper excels at. But the other thing that it excels at is parametric geometry, which allows you to procedurally build up the size of things of your building so that if you have to change dimensions, it can quickly update. I don't know exactly how Francis did the Dita dress, the Professor Patani. You've probably seen his plastic dress, but that initially I gave him a Grasshopper file which split up UVs into a chainmail to produce it. It's not like it's a kind of typical thing to do with it, but basically it allows you to have a situation like that where you can adjust the dress size and then the actual tectonic that builds it up can update on its own without you having to manually go through it and like rebuild a million little joints. So what we're going to use it for is for turning these guys into a triangulated mesh. We're not going to go too much into Grasshopper today, just kind of the bare minimum in order for you guys to get some landscape shot from your curves. Because the workflow moving forward is on Monday, you're going to have a session with Fleet. We're going to want you guys to do a lot of your site design in 2 dimensions with the curves, and the contour curves, and like understanding how they operate. That tends to be a more effective way of doing it than to go in and like manually model stuff and go back and forth. But as the semester goes on, there'll probably be a combination of both. But the kind of initial site layouts where you guys are going to talk about putting parking spaces, parking lots, and driveways, and relative slopes and things that you need for those situations, it can be more easily addressed probably in a 2-dimensional contour drawing. So once you have made those adjustments, this is going to be a way for you to begin to bring it into 3 dimensions and kind of visually inspect it. Okay? So to bring these curves into Grasshopper, we need what's called a curve primitive. If you look up at the top, under params, there's a bunch of stuff in black hexes, and there's like a spirally thing that's called curve. You can also get to it by double-clicking in here on the main space and typing in curve. And anything, the things that are in like the black hexagons, they used to be called primitives, now they're called parameters. those are like little nodes that allow you to bring in information from your Rhino model into Grasshopper. So I'm going to click on one of those and then make a little orange thing here. And we're going to fill it with curves. So actually link these curves into this component here in Grasshopper. We have to right click on the component. And it says set multiple curves down here. We're going to want to click on set multiple curves. And it says curve as a reference. I select all my curves. I press enter. And you can see it's not orange anymore, which means that it has information in it and it's happy. And you can see that my curves have turned red over here. The geometry that exists in Grasshopper is red on your screen. If you select the component, it turns green on your screen in Rhino. There's a little component curves. Okay. So next thing we're going to get is Delaunay triangulation. So I'm going to type in Delaunay. And there's a thing that says Delaunay mesh, a little green, whatever that is, next to it. Go ahead and click on that. And it gives me this guy. The nice thing about Grasshopper is it tells you what it needs to plug in and out of these things. The stuff on the left of a component are the inputs, and the stuff on the right are the outputs. If I hover my mouse over one of the letters, like it'll tell me what it wants. In this case, it wants points per triangulate and a base plane. Like I said, the Delaunay works on it's like a 2D projection of the points. And in order to get a terrain, it's basically computing it as a 2D entity and then projecting it up. So obviously this like wouldn't work on things that are like fully three-dimensional, but in most cases your landscapes are never going to have stuff flying over top of itself, like unless you're doing Utah, and you're just going to have to like model those little those natural arches by hand. In general, for the type of like landscaping that you guys are going to do, like ground doesn't go upside down. So it's totally okay that it's just going to project this thing flat and then remap the points back up into 3D. So we can leave this plane at x, y. Okay, but what we have is a list of curves, and what it's asking for is a list of points. There's got to be like an intermediary component in order to turn our curves into points. Right? So to do that, we type in divide, and there's a bunch of options for divide. There's divide curve, which will take each curve and divide it an even number of times. Like if you say like 10, it'll divide every curve 10 times to make a point at the 10th of each curve. But you notice that like all of our curves have wildly different lengths. So we'll end up with points that are wildly different densities. There's divide length, which is what we are going to use, which is basically divides by an even distance along the curve. And there's divide distance, which is based on radius between points. So length tracks along the curve to find the division. Distance uses a global arc between points to find the division. So I'm going to click on divide length. And I get something like this. And this guy's looking for two inputs. It's looking for a curve to divide and a length of segments. So first, if I click on this little node thing on the right of curve, drag over to the seed on divide length, it'll input our curves into divide length. Divide length is still orange because it needs a length specified. So once we have that connected, we're going to make a number slider. So I double click, type in slider, and get a guy like this. And this is basically just a component in Grasshopper that allows you to quickly change a number by just clicking and dragging. And I'm going to put that into the L. And you can see that it's divided each one of these by 1, so they've got tiny little dots everywhere. We don't want that much density because the computer will die. So I'm going to double click on the slider and set the max. Down here, if I click on that, like I'll do it again. If you double click where it says slider, it opens up this window. And down here in our numeric domain, it says max. Put it up at like 40. 50. Hit OK. And if I push this up, you see that the points get farther apart. And the lower this goes, the closer the points get together. Experiment. Okay, so once we have that, we can then take the P out of our divide link, which are our division points, and plug it into the points of our Delaunay. And you can tell that it's doing something bad when we look over here and it's all put up funny. So everyone get this far? Yeah? Okay, so I don't want to get too much into data sorting in Grasshopper, but basically what it did was when I brought in these curves, it created a group for each one of these curves. So when it does the divide, it takes, for each curve, it takes all those points and puts it in a group. You can think about it this way. So each curve has its own group of points, and then when it's doing the Delaunay, it's doing the Delaunay for every group instead of for all the points at once. So for each curve, it's making its own Delaunay mesh, which is not what we want, right? We want the Delaunay meshes with all the curves. So if I right-click on the P in Delaunay on the first points, and click on flatten, it'll get rid of all the groups. And you can see it's making a nice mesh over all of them. So again, I right-click on the P in Delaunay and click on flatten. We'll get into that stuff more as the semester goes on, but for now, don't worry about that. Okay. So in the shading mode with the meshes in Grasshopper, it's a little annoying. You can't really like see like, your edges of your meshes. So I usually like to put on wireframe, which is this like cylinder up here. And then I can see like the triangulated meshes of my system, which you might find useful if you're like trying to fine-tune your division distance, like how much you want to divide this. You'll be able to see the actual kind of polygon meshes when you produce a little bit more easily. And then once you have that, this geometry, this Delaunay mesh doesn't actually exist in the Rhino model right now. It's in the buffer of Grasshopper, which is why we're able to adjust like this. It's able to recalculate this mesh so quickly. But we need to actually get it into Rhino as a real piece of geometry. So I got to right-click on the M of Delaunay, which is the output of the mesh, and click on the A thing that says bake. And I pick a layer for it, I hit OK, and it's got a real live mesh in Rhino now. Then once you have that baked, you can just close Grasshopper, and it'll leave it there. How are we doing with that? Questions? Got the Delaunay mesh? Okay. Yeah, this is smart food, right? Okay, so who remembers like why I might not like this mesh from our session last time on Maya, which was a long time ago, I know, it's like 3 weeks, right? But what about this mesh might make me unhappy? Triangles. Triangles are terrible. That's not totally true, sometimes triangles are good. But many of you may find that you dislike working with triangles. So I'm going to show you a couple different ways of getting this into Maya. Also remember that like the idea is to use as few input points as possible with design. So like a heavier landscape mesh can often be more difficult to work with when you actually start trying to design your project and get it to work with your building. So I'm going to show you a command now called drape. And what that does is it's basically going to map a NURB surface over top of the mesh, and it'll allow us to kind of fine-tune the resolution of that. So I'm going to go to my top view. Type in drape. It says drag window over here to drape, but before we do that, we want to set the spacing. Like a larger number here will be a lower resolution surface. So if I put it at 10, and I click and drag, this isn't like a really precise tool, it doesn't have snaps, but it'll be good enough for what we're doing. It's made a NURB surface now. See, so this is a NURB surface now, following that triangulated mesh. Right? And like decide to go to a finer mesh with the NURB surface or a larger one by adjusting the spacing. The lower spacing will give you more quads, and a larger spacing will give you fewer quads. Okay? Any questions about that?
Do you prefer to use any numbers?
What?
Do you prefer the total to use any numbers like something like 6 or something?
Whatever works for you. Not too many, or not too few. Like the baby bear story. Or, okay? So, we're going to export both of these to Maya just so we can go over how to operate with them. This is going to be an opportunity for us to talk about converting from NURBS to polygons in Rhino and Maya. We're going to ultimately want to be working in polygons when we're doing our design work because it allows us greater flexibility, especially when working with complex geometry like the landscape. But NURBS has a lot of advantages in terms of being able to measure things kind of more accurately in Rhino. So there's going to be a lot about going back and forth between two software. And when you guys get in the habit of understanding what software is best for what tools and being comfortable about continuously moving back and forth between the platforms. That's another reason why our project doesn't move up to this point. So when we go back and forth between software, we want everything to kind of snap to the same location. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and export this drape surface as an IGES. Okay. Just using the default settings. Okay. And then I'm also going to export the polygon mesh just so you can see how that looks. And an OBJ. So the rule is IGES for NURBS, OBJ for meshes, going both directions. Polygons or meshes, that's a synonymous thing. Mesh. Once you have both of those exported, we'll go ahead and get into Maya. And go ahead and open up your file with your weird spaceship thing from last time. Okay, so what we're going to do now is let's import both of those. Go to my box. Okay. Import, and I'm going to import the OBJ first. And it's going to be somewhere over here. I know a lot of you guys kind of somehow messed up the scale thing last week. So your stuff's like you can't find your project, go to view, camera attribute editor, and under here where it says bar clip plane, make that number bigger. Basically, Maya, to save rendering in your graphics card memory, sets a limit on the scene. So if I make this number smaller, you can see I can't see anything anymore. If I just zoom out, I only see part of it. Like it basically won't render anything to the screen beyond a certain distance, which helps the render interface accelerate better. Which is why one of the reasons why Maya has less lag than a lot of other modeling platforms. And speed is your friend. So if you can't see it, though, it means your thing is like really big and really far away. So just add more zeros. So this one's my OBJ guy with triangles, and we'll take a look at it in a second. But for now, I'm going to put it on a layer and hide it. I'm going to select it, go to my channel box layer editor, which is this guy up here. It's not highlighted, make sure it's it's highlighted. And then this like little like white plane with a sphere on top of it will create a new layer and add whatever you have selected to that layer. So I'm just going to do that. So I've got this guy selected and I add a new layer, call it layer 1. I'm going to double click on the name of it and give it a name. We'll call it mesh landscape. Save. So that's easy to find. And if you have like a bunch of layers that are probably empty, it's because like you import images to add layers. You can go to layers, delete unused layers, and it'll clean it up. And what's nice about this is it allows us to just turn everything on that layer on and off, just like in Rhino. Okay, so turn off my mesh landscape. Okay, let's get the IGES file in now. Probably takes a little bit longer to import because in general nerves are much more memory intensive than polygons. So we could have converted this nerve surface into polygons in Rhino, but in general Maya is much better for doing those conversions. Rhino's mesh functions are really limited. It's primarily a nerve modeling software, whereas Maya has actually both. Maya has also nerves. In fact, it has the same nerves algorithm that Rhino does. It does have fewer nerves tools, especially when it comes to measurement. But in general, you can go from like Rhino to Maya without any loss of information. And then Maya has much better tools in terms of converting nerves to polygons. So let's say we wanted to convert this into a polygon mesh where each one of these spans between isocurves turns into a polygon face. It's actually really easy to do in Maya, and it's really helpful in terms of the workflow between going back and forth, because you know that if you make a nerve surface that that you're happy with the form of, that you can get a directly corresponding mesh surface in Maya. Okay, so let's pretend like I really like this landscape and I want to make it into a mesh object. Go to Modify, Convert, Nerves to Polygon, and you want to open the box. We'll go over the settings here really quickly. Under Type at the top here, you want to put it on quads. That's the whole point of the grid, not to have to deal with all those triangles. Under tessellation method, you want to have it on general. Put the little thing next to general. Under tessellation controls, next to U-type, by default it says per served number of isoforms in 3D, or per served number of isoforms. You want to put it on per span for both the U and the V. Make sure it says per span. And then for the number, put each of those on 1. And what is a span is the length between here and here, your isocurve. So if you say a number of divisions, or number of faces per span at 1 in both directions, it'll put 1 face in both directions of this division. Whereas if I put in 2 for one of them, like it would actually cut this in half in one direction. I'll put it once. Once I have those settings, I hit apply. And it makes my mesh object, but it keeps the nerves object still there. Like if I go to my wireframe view by pressing 4, you can see the nerves object is going to be curved still, but the polygon object will have straight edges. You go ahead and select the nerves and then delete it. So I'm left with just the polygon object. especially when you're designing your objects in 3D, you're gonna find it's like gonna be frequently more easy to just delete out areas of the landscape and like rebuild the landscape to fit the kind of orientation of your object. Like we're not necessarily gonna have to do that today. So just keep that in mind. I think like a lot of people try too hard to keep the same mesh and like deform the mesh to fit their object instead of just making a clean slate and then using like the kind of split and insert as a tool in order to snap it back like we did last time with the curves. I mean, if we delete a hole in this mesh, right, we could make a new object and then use insert edge loop and all that to get the vertices to kind of make it line up exactly. I think that's probably a better way of working in general. But today we're going to go over a bunch of tools for manipulating large meshes like this. Last time we talked about always kind of trying to minimize the number of faces that you have to deal with in order to keep a control over the geometry and have like, a smooth geometry. Today we're going to talk about some tools that will help when you're in a situation that you just have a lot of faces you have to deal with. Okay. Okay, so the first tool we're actually going to go over is the move tool, but we're going to go into some specifics about it. With the move tool, you actually have the ability to flatten things to a specific elevation or height using a combination of your snaps and some settings in your tool settings. So I'm just going to right click on my object and go to vertex. And I'm just going to drag a bunch of vertices in here, just so that as a demonstration. So if I turn on my point snap, I think by default, let me reset this to default. If I snap with it, it moves them all as one. Kind of keeps their relative orientation together. But if I wanted to snap a whole bunch of them to a single plane, I would go into the move settings, the tool settings for the move tool. The tool settings, if you don't have this guy over here or over here, is this wrench with the dots next to it, up here in the top right. If I open that, you get this kind of menu. I like to drag mine over to the right, because I never have it open at the same time as I have this other stuff open, and it gives me a bigger word window. Also, this is the way mine used to be. I don't know why they did it over here. So it's my kind of old habit, but it's better, so just do it this way. Tool settings. If we scroll down, there's a thing that says move snap settings. Under there it says retain component spacing. If we click that off, whatever axis we grab, it'll move all of our points to snap along that axis to the whatever point we determine. So it'll actually flatten everything. So if we look here, we grab this arrow, and I snap down to the bottom, you can see it's now flattened everything into a single plane. That's obviously pretty useful when you're trying to make tools, or I mean not tools, floors, walls, things like that. Maya has good snaps, so use them. I don't want to see, like if there's something that's supposed to be flat, it should be dead flat, because it's incredibly easy to do. I get a lot of models from size to 2, you know, like try to double, well, of course I'm going to make the wire. There we go. It'll like kind of step in like multiples of 2 in terms of scaling. But it doesn't ever really work that well. The only thing that actually works well with it is it's really good for flattening things. So if I put it on 1, and I grab my z-axis, it won't smoothly scale, like it'll snap to a flat plane in that axis. And I could do the same thing in the other ones and all snap into an impossibly small point, which is bad. But sometimes this is also a useful way of snapping 2 points from different objects together, or 2 vertices. So that's the scale tool with discrete scale. This is just the basic kind of manipulators within Maya, just being aware of like what the kind of snap options are with them. Okay? Oh no. Okay. Next thing we're going to talk about is the soft select. Have you guys used soft select yet?
Yeah, I'm gonna like edit it.
Yeah. Some of you, I think Kyle's been talking about it, but then also some of you may just accidentally had it on. Not knowing it. To turn soft select on and off, you just press B, but you have to be in component mode for it to kind of register. So I'm going to go to vertex mode, and I'm going to select some vertices. Actually, Actually, I'm only going to select a single vertex. What soft select does is it allows you to move one vertex, and then it will affect all the vertexes around it smoothly, so that when you get in a really complex mesh and you're trying to make some adjustments to it, you can go in and it'll make a smooth adjustment. Like if I move this guy, right, it's going to make a peak, and then if I'm trying to make it smooth, I have to come in here and like manually get this like all exactly right to get the curve I want, which is basically impossible. So with the soft select, if I press B, you may get like a gradient like this. What this is showing is that here's the point I selected. The color represents a fall off of influence. Like the yellower it is, the more like, influence it has, and then eventually fades out to black. And all these ones that are still like blue, they don't get affected at all. So if I move this now, you can see it moves all of the points around it. And again, we can go to our tool settings and begin to fine tune this. You go into the move settings in the tools and drag all the way down. There's an area for soft selection. You can also turn it on and off here, or you can just hit B. Either way works. You have a fall off radius. If you make this number smaller, it affects a smaller area. You can type in an even bigger number. Like 500. Awesome. Giant zip. Okay. So you can kind of fine tune the fall off in here, and this is a kind of really good way to do like smooth transformation to a complex mesh, like a landscape, especially while you're sketching, just trying to get a general idea. Again, like this is a situation where like if you start manipulating a bunch in here, you want to take it back into Rhino and analyze the slopes, get the contours from it. But if you look at this, there's also an option in terms of like what type of fall off you have. This fall off curve is the default one. It's kind of like a sine curve. If you look up here at curve presets, there's some other options. Like this is a linear fall off. So if I pull up, it should make like a pyramid. Yeah. Cone. There's like a ziggurat one for some reason. So it makes like ziggurats. This is loud here. Volcano. That's a good call. We'll go with volcano. I would say something else. It's swollen. This thing, I don't know what that does. Okay, so anyway, you can play around with all those as much as you want. This one's got a flat top, this one fall off. Whatever. By default, I tend to like use the sine curve. You guys have any questions about soft select? It's pretty straightforward, right? Yeah. Okay. So most of the time when we're selecting faces, we're just like turn off soft select, window dragging over, and we're selecting them one at a time. When a mesh is this complex, like say I want to delete like a certain number of faces, and I knew which ones they were, but I didn't want to have to like go through. Like say this mesh was so complex that I couldn't window drag all of them. Like this is a pretty annoying way of selecting. So what we can do is actually select them with a paintbrush. If you go over here above the move tool, there's like this little paintbrush looking thing. You click on that, and then go up here to your components and put it on faces. It gives you this like little paintbrush with a red circle, and you can click and drag and add faces based on that color. And you don't have to hold down shift or anything to add, like it automatically adds every time you click and drag. And if you want to remove, you hold down control and it'll remove faces. Some of you guys are probably not getting any selection because you're, if you look at your brush, like the little red circle is small. If you go over here to our tool settings, you have a top that radius U. That gives you the size of the paintbrush for selecting. So like smaller size, obviously does a smaller amount. The larger size does a big amount. Right? So again, once your models start to get complex, like with the landscape, this can be useful for kind of just focusing in on specific areas. Also, some of you in the last class had this selection method, the square. Make sure you're on the circle that's filled in. Otherwise it won't work. So we got soft select, we've got all of our different move snaps, scaling. We've got selected by painting. We can also sculpt the mesh through painting, which is probably not a good way to you guys to work precisely, but if you're just trying to test some things out or kind of get things close, it's a good way to work. I helped a workshop this summer where like we had like one 3D model that was from a very large female actress, and then we had another 3D model of a small model, and I was able to use this command to kind of push the meshes until they fit together. It was actually even much more dense mesh than this. So this tool is called the Sculpt, or Sculpt Mesh. And to get to it, we're going to go to Edit Mesh. Is it? Nope. Mesh. Sculpt Geometry Tool. And this gives you a brush too, with like a radius. And I think you want to be on vertex for this. Where's my radius? Oh, I guess you want to be in object mode. Sorry. When you're in object mode, it'll give you this tool. You have some fall-offs, which are similar to the soft select fall-offs. And then you have some different operations. Like right now, I have it set on bulge. If you look at the little bulby things pulling it out. And then we have an option for displacement. If you make this number bigger, it'll displace more. So let's do that, and then let's make our radius bigger. And you can see like we can paint, and it like pulls the mesh up. So it's a pretty good way for making tumors like that. You can play around with the different brushes. There's like a pinch brush which will like strict edges like closer together. You can see it's kind of like creasing the edges tighter together in that area. Which can be nice if you're like modeling a fat lady and you need to get like some edges in there like where it starts to fold over top of itself. I don't really know what you do with this architecture. Probably you won't use this, but for some of your projects it might be useful in terms of how you're addressing the site.
Right now.
You can do much more subtle effects than what I did here. I just kind of wanted to show you how this thing works. Like, you can use it for pushing into carving. So again, like when you have a mesh that's like too heavy to actually manually move each vertex, these tools allow you to kind of operate with some control over it. Obviously, when you're designing buildings, I would prefer you guys have like lower resolution meshes that you can control more explicitly, but push comes to shove if you have these options out there. You guys have questions about the Sculpt Former? Now you can set this really subtle too, so that you can kind of really fine tune like a slope in an area. It has a smooth tool, so like if you make some modeling decisions that have some like hard edges someplace that you don't want, you want to relax, you can come in with the smooth one here. I think this one's smooth. And it'll basically smooth out the vertices, make it kind of more continuous. Okay. How are we doing on Sculpt tool? What about we do one more tool, and then we'll get into the assignment. Okay? You guys okay with Sculpt tool? Mm-hmm. Okay. Like the other class is really dumb. You can make sure you tell them that. Like we have to stop the Sculpt tool. We're going to do one more. And this is one that I actually do use quite a bit, especially when I'm sketching. And this works not only on single objects, but on multiple objects. It's called the lattice deformer. Basically what it does is it makes a cage around your object and allows you like something like this, like we could control it with say 5 CVs. There's a cage edit in Rhino that works similarly. I'll show you first on the object level. Say I have this. I select it, I go to create deformers, lattice, and I open the box. Under advanced, No, under basic, I like to use local mode off. We can talk about the differences with what that means in a second. And then we can just go ahead and create it. Make sure you have your history on up here. Hit create, and it puts a big box around your object. If I go into the attribute editor of the lattice deformer, under lattice shape, it says STU divisions. I can add divisions here, not 23, and it'll give me effectively CDs to work with. Because once I have these divisions here, I can right click on the box, go to lattice point, and I can move them just like a regular vertex. But you can see that it's deforming smoothly the whole mesh. So we can get back, so even if you have a really complicated mesh, if you want to make some kind of smooth transformations with it like you would normally with a low poly mesh, you can apply this lattice to it and also deform it. Now the difference between local mode and this mode is that this mode kind of operates like a NURBS curve, which is why I prefer you guys work like this. It's kind of has the same logic as a NURBS curve, where there's like a smooth fall off in between how these points affect each other. If we get into the local mode, we can get, if we turn that on, you'll actually get like a lot more localized deformation. Like there's more of a fall off. See if I can. So like if I make this number lower, you can see that it's sharper. It's bigger, it falls out more. Basically it's saying that this guy only affects like 2 divisions away. So it's not going to have like a smooth fall off. Like see how like I'm moving this, it's not affecting anything down here. When I put this at 2, it means that this thing's influence stops at this point. So you may find this useful too when you're trying to create like a hard edge out of something and so forth. So lattice deformer is again another sketching tool. Basically, I want you guys to get the understanding that like Maya is really good for sketching and working through ideas quickly, but you're always going to have to come back to Rhino. You can do the lattice deformer on individual vertex areas. So like if we want to deform just like a portion of this hill, kind of like with what we were doing with the smoke deformer, I can select like just a set of vertexes and then create a lattice just for those vertices. So my inputs now on the lattice deformer will only affect the vertexes that I had selected when I made my page. Right? So this can be another way of like targeting specific areas on your meshes and making manipulations to them once their face count gets too high. You can also do multiple objects with the lattice deformer. So I take the ball, take this thing we made, I copy it a bunch of times. You don't have to do this. Just run the lattice deformer. That also may be useful to you guys. I think like in general, like, when I work with my own projects, I just assume that there's going to be a period where I produce a bunch of stuff in Maya working conceptually through the project, and then there's going to be a period of what I call it like rationalization or cleaning, where I bring it back into Rhino and like rebuild it more precisely. But it's not like a clean kind of back and forth thing. You kind of develop your own workflow yourself. Maya is really good for checking stuff out fast. And Rhino isn't. Okay, so for the assignment, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making one manifold connection between our object and the site, and then one sculpted connection in the landscape. I think I scaled this up by 5 to the last group to make it seem like it's about the size of a house relative to the site. Your guys' all might be different. So when I say a manifold connection, that means like a connection where like this guy and come on, base, go away. That base. You notice they don't have the same number of edges. So I have to play a game here where I'm actually deleting edges, and I'm going to delete the corners. It might seem like a weird thing to do, but I think it'll be okay. I got something, and this is going to cause this. You notice this is no longer a quad. So it's just important for you to keep aware of that. We can get it back to the quad later by adding edge loops and stuff, but for now this is fine. And then I can move these up or use like merge to center. Maybe let's use merge to center. So if we do merge to center between two objects, vertices, like it'll move the points to the same spot, but it won't actually like weld it into one piece. So I haven't done mesh combine, I'm just doing merge to center. So there, that'd be like a manifold connection between our object and the landscape. Okay? That's three I got. I go in it, and you see how this is still like a hard seam here? That means these are still separate pieces that have been kind of welded together. So that's an example of like a manifold connection. And then say I wanted to create like a patio down here, for example, I could go and use my paint faces tool. Too big. Make it smaller. We'll go faces. And we'll select like closed faces. All of this. And we can snap it at this height. Have like a flat area now with some retaining walls, and then I can come in here and start using my snaps to align some things to make it more sculptured nice. If you like say like I wanted to make like a kind of range up here, I could do edit mesh extrude, bring them up. I'm just kind of spitballing right now, like you don't have to do exactly this shit. Like I just kind of want to give you ideas of what we're looking for. Here, we got berm. That berm's terrible. Move it down. And then we can design the berm. Align with the geometry more. Snap. And so like I created this link and I want to say I want to have add an edge back in between there. There's a lot of people ended up doing the last group was when they wanted to add edges back into their project. So let's say I want to connect smoothly to there, for example. There's an interactive split tool under Edit Mesh, which kind of works. And the way it works is you kind of click and drag, so it snaps the vertice you want, and then you do it to the other one, and then you press enter, and it adds an edge. And you have to use this tool instead of the insert edge loop tool, because the insert edge loop tool only works on continuous quads, right? So once we start losing the quads, we're going to have to start operating on it through this tool. Interactive split edge tool. So most people found the way that tool performed unsatisfactory because it frequently crashes and doesn't make what you want it to do. So there's actually an older version of the tool which works better. And I'll show you that now. It's in a secret menu, which is, I'm sure makes you guys really excited that there are secret menus that you have to learn. But it works a lot better than the tool I just showed you, so I'll show you here in a second. You go to object mode on your mesh, you hold down shift and right mouse button, and it brings up this secret menu, which actually has most of the tools in Edit Mesh that you're going to use. Like I don't start out with this because the hotbox is nicer because it has like everything for all the tools. But this has, if you shift and right mouse button over a polygon, it opens up a menu that just has the same tools except from Edit Mesh basically. So we've got you've got extrude, you've got sculpt geometry tool, append to polygon tool, we insert as a tool like we used last week. You'll probably end up using this menu a lot more than the hotbox as you move forward, but I think it's more comfortable for people to be able to see all of the possible menus at once. So to use the old school split, you go over to split, and instead of interactive split, you just go to split polygon tool, and it works in a similar way where you click and drag on an edge until it snaps to a point, and then you press enter. The difference is that this one actually works, and the interactive split polygon tool doesn't. So I think it's better. But the interactive split polygon tool is the new one, so Autodesk has hidden this one away from you guys. This doesn't have to be like an awesome landscape design that you're doing here. I just need you guys to show me that you are comfortable with the modeling tools that we went over today. Okay, so there's going to be that's terrible. Super bad design. Okay. There's going to be at least one manifold connection to your landscape. That's the sock connection, and then also like a design interaction between the site and your piece. In this case, I'm building like a really awesome retaining wall system and a patio underneath it. Super good.
Do you wait to merge your two objects until like all the connections are made, or add each to it?
Yeah, I do. Well, in this case, I might not actually want to merge it. And we're gonna get into like smoothing and stuff later, but like I've decided I don't want to merge this right now, so I'm not going to. That's not a very good answer. The reason why I'm not is that, especially when we get into rendering, like your building is not part of the landscape. Your building may connect to the landscape, certainly, but it is not landscape, right? It's going to be made out of different materials. So what we're going to be working on moving forward is like that resolution of that connection. So that's why I want you guys to develop both like kind of manifold and non-manifold connections to the site. Okay? Like you guys will see like for example, we could bring up like, once we start adding more detail into this, like we could bring up a piece of the landscape that begins to stretch over the roof of our piece, and then it becomes more of like a kind of tongue and groove joint. We'll be exploring the kind of connectivity between it more, but I don't want you to make it one piece right now. Just like make it the snap connection. And make a better wall than that, because that's terrible. It's like platform thing, right? Any questions about what's required? So like I'm really not grading you guys on design, but there's really no reason not to do something nice with this. It's not going to take you a long time. Sound good? Okay. So that's it for today. I'll walk around and answer any questions you guys have, and then if you're done, feel free to take off.